All right, so I am painting with the different textures on my clone stamp layer. So notice the difference my clone stamp layer makes. But I can also take that layer directly and transform it and warp it. Because when you're playing with these soft textures, especially clone stamping, you might not always orient them in the most advantageous way, the way that looks most like your creature. And remember, we're just trying to suggest our creature. We don't need it to be a cloud rendering of our creature. We just need it to suggest and inspire our creature design. So even though the tail has more of an angled, I'm going to keep it a little bit more horizontal just to be more believable. All right, so now maybe a little bit more clone stamping. Remember, I have a pressure sensitive brush, so it allows me to just tap lightly. And I'm on a low opacity now, only 28%. So I can target an area and then just lightly fix it with texture. And so for these little horns at the top, I might kind of paint those in, breaking through with little highlights, but be very aware of kind of the structure of how clouds work and not make anything too repetitive. I just need to suggest it. And on this outside edge of the head, I can paint some texture in. They'll be more believable. And remember that your target selection has to move with you. Okay, the other great thing about keeping clone stamp on its own layer is you can always turn it on and off and see if it's doing what you want it to do. And you're never losing your original pixels. And I like to sample clone stamp from all layers, so everything I see is going to be copied. It might make sense to make it only do the layers except for the sky, but I want to see the sky and be able to use it if I need to. So it's just however you can make the tool predictable. All right, let's see. So you can also, keeping it on its own layer, I'm going to do a very low opacity erase here. You can also erase away from your clone stamp, where it's not quite so helpful. Just like you can erase away from your cloud layers, your reference layers. Now the reason I'm not cutting away and erasing all of my cloud layers that don't overlap with my creature is because I can use a lot of this texture still to paint in the features I don't have covered yet, like the feet. Like this is all going to get erased, but what a beautiful cloud to use for this bottom foot. So I'm going to shift my opacity on my clone stamp more to 100%. Just really, whoops, copy that in. Give me some raw material there. Then maybe shift it down pretty quickly to a lower opacity to transition it. And then I see that that foot is actually quite dark in some places. So I kind of digitally paint with cloud in the right way to suggest it. Let it transition. And be prepared to erase it out. I'm going to use this edge and I'm going to use it under the head here. Try to help turn that. And then I'm just going to glaze over with some cloud texture. Now, it's all about how comfortable you are with this digital painting aspect. If you overwork it, it all just becomes mush. And so you can do a lot of it with just straight compositing as well. So when I feel like I'm overdoing it, then I go back to my cloud reference and I might just composite it in instead. Right now I'm still okay with all the interior stuff. And it's all on a safe cloud stamp layer, clone stamp layer. And if I ever go too far, I can just erase it out. All right, so next. The beauty of clouds is transparency is something very common to them. So it's not that I need to delete the clouds all the way. I just need to kind of limit their opacity where they're less suggestive of my creature. And that can just be done with that soft brush. All right. So now I'm going to go to some other cloud reference. See what else I have. Move this guy up above, just underneath my clone stamp. Select all the blues around. Refine the edge. It will remember my setting. It will soften it. Delete that out a few times. The more you delete, the softer and more feathered it will be. Move it into place. Figure out where do I need this. Maybe where it's getting a little too crazy in the head here. Try to keep the light logic in mind, that light should be on top, shadow should be underneath. Don't mess with that too much. Feel free to make it your own. Now to make this cloud match, I need to play with its color balance a little bit, because I can see that its highlights are kind of a little too blue. So I want to push those a little bit into yellow and magenta, just a little bit. And the midtones, kind of dirty those up a little. And the shadows. And you can see that that color balance just helps it sit down a little bit better in those shadows. even though it's at 100%. Then I can go to levels, and I can limit the highlights just a bit. I can play with the midtones, how light or dark they are. And then I can get in with the eraser. Pretty aggressive at first, getting rid of the hard edges, cut away from it, blend it in. And if I really want to soften everything in it at once, I would use the Gaussian blur filter. But I want to keep some of those hard edges that are catching light. And then where I think I've got the hard edges down, then I go to a lower opacity eraser. And I knock it down a bit. And if I need to, I can kind of knock back the clone stamp that I have on top of it. And it's like anything we do, we want to make sure everything we do is effective, so I can turn off that layer, see if that helps me towards my goals. And of course, I can just take that whole layer and take its opacity down a little bit too, until it sits just right within the structure. And if I need to, I can go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and control how soft it is. I can even sample it. That looks about right. Okay. Now with that reference, it allows me to kind of clean up some of that clone stamp I had in here, erase a little bit of it away. It's a little clumsy looking. Overdid it a bit, especially where that eye is concerned. So we're just suggesting certain moves that I might have to play with color balance. Get a little bit more yellow back into it. There we go. So that really helps now. Okay, now back to clone stamp. It's got more material to steal from now. And I'm going to try to get this nose figured out. Paint it in, low opacity. How would that highlight work? Remember, you can paint it in and then erase it away. I'm just trying to do everything large and soft-edged and without a lot of precision to suggest the cloud. Okay. So I think I've got a lot of that worked out. Soften some of those shadows. That looks too much like a drawn line though, so let me do something bold here. Cut right across it. There we go. All right, now, how can I deal with the foot at the bottom? Well, I'm going to steal it from here.